Ed Bernstein Show. Now, here's Ed.
Hey, welcome to our show. Hey, you're going to hear an incredible story today. My guest is Jaysse Lopez, who went from homelessness to, I don't know, can I say making millions?
That's a fair assessment.
Yeah, in the sneaker business.
Yes, sir.
Now, I'm going to kind of work backwards.
Yes, sir.
Okay? You own an establishment at the Fashion Show Mall.
Caesars. No, we're at Caesars Palace.
I mean, at the Forum Shop.
Yes, sir.
Called Urban
Necessities.
Urban Necessities. And it was in the fashion show.
Yes,
Started out in the Boulevard Mall.
Yes, sir.
But even going back further than that, you came to Las Vegas. You're a young man, early 20s, maybe 20 years old. Came out here, didn't have a job. You know, we're homeless, living out in the streets.
Yes, sir.
Showering out
In the fountains in Caesars.
In the fountains of Caesars. And you took that to building a very successful business. It's a remarkable story. I mean, most people would have given up a long time ago. Let's talk about how you became homeless.
Yeah, so I traveled, I job hopped a lot. I think that was the first problem, is I was just really itchy and just couldn't sit still in the same place. And like most people, was living outside my means from the very beginning. Not much financial literacy to, you know, kind of put the shekels to the side to make sure that I'm good.
Did you finish high school?
Yes, I did finish high school.
You grew up in New Jersey.
I grew up in Jersey.
Moved to Vegas. After high school, you never went to college.
Correct.
And you just kind of like were aimless in what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I really didn't have an understanding of what I should be doing or wanted to do, right? I just knew that school wasn't for me. I always struggled with sitting still and being in the class and doing the homework, but I tried to find more efficient ways just at every part of it. And so...
when you say more efficient ways, okay, I mean, you seem to me, I mean, you created basically an industry. And by looking at something and seeing a different way to do it, were you that kind of guy all the time?
I was the kid that would take a VCR apart just to find out what parts or how stuff works.
Right.
But I wasn't necessarily the guy that like put it all back together, right? I always had a team that helped me do that, especially with the brand. So when I fast forward a bit and I tell you I lose my job and I decide to like embark on sneakers, it was me with curiosity of an industry that I saw a lot of flaws in and a lot of pieces missing. And now when I looked at brands or athletes or celebrities, teams that I like looked up to, every single one of the people or brands that I like respected or had invested time in, they're 10 to 30 years into their craft. So I've had this appreciation for sneakers and fashion, and I figured, you know, I have time to do this. I don't have a job. Right. I tried. I legitimately tried to find a job out here, but, you know, it became a little bit, I think it wasn't for me.
Did you have a love of the product of sneakers or an appreciation for the industry?
I think I fell more in love with the stories than the actual product, right? I learned early on, like, for me to be able to consume at the volume that I would like to or I'm expected to, being the founder and the face of this brand, I had to be okay with shedding all throughout the process. So I fell in love with the stories and the narrating of the story of product and how to curate the store. Like, if you go to the store in Caesars, it was my try at what I think a museum should look like, but I still need and want you to see, touch, and feel. And so my staff is trained more to be kind of like that host in a museum that's curating your experience. And, you know, if you want to buy, cool. If you don't, that's fine too. Okay. We need people to go in there and talk about how different this retail experience is.
But when it all began, at some point in time, you made a decision about going into the sneaker business.
Correct.
How did that develop?
Well, by that point, I'm over 110 applications in a 6-month span in
Looking
Vegas.
for jobs.
Correct. All retail, because that's all I know is
So
retail.
you tried, like, you applied to where? Foot Locker?
I applied from, Foot Lockers all the way to LV, LVMH and stuff, because my previous experience, I've worked with George Jensen, Ferragamo, Apple, AT&T. I've job hopped a lot. And from every part of it, looking back, I learned how to talk to guests and how not to talk to guests. And when you start something, you try to copy or mimic who you think is doing it right. And I guess I'm fortunate enough, or I know I'm fortunate enough, that I've been able to do that for so long that I created my own iteration of it. And now that's being replicated and mimicked, and it's really cool to see that something that I had no understanding of when I jumped in, now I'm being looked at as like one of the forefathers of how to resell. And it's really cool to see the impact this brand has created globally.
So one day you're homeless in Vegas.
Yes, sir.
Probably there's a movie that name, right? Somewhere. You're homeless in Vegas, and you see a line of people.
Correct.
Waiting in line
At Fashion Show Mall.
At the Fashion Show Mall, and you inquire, hey, why are you guys waiting in line?
Right.
And you learn that there's a new sneaker coming out. Which sneaker was it?
It was a Jordan. I don't remember the exact silhouette because we're talking 20 plus years ago. But where my curiosity instantly went was I struggled with processing, seeing hundreds of people outside of a store that's physically open and selling product. And these guys are waiting for product that comes out days later, like a day and a half later.
Apple products go through the same thing.
Right? But we're talking 20 years ago,
right.
and that wasn't as common, especially in sneakers. It isn't. And so as I'm looking at this line, I'm scratching my head looking at these people that are standing in line. I'm like, why are we standing in line here? What's so special? All these sneakers coming out. You guys are, why? So, okay, again, why? Well, some of us want to sell them. Some of us want to keep them. So you're telling me you could sell them for more and it's worth the investment of time? Yeah. Well, how many of you guys have jobs? Like, I'm literally just asking these questions through this line. And I instantly said, well, can I stand in line for one of you guys? You could go do that and just give me like $20. And so I used to go through Fashion Show, Venetian, Caesars, Bellagio, to kind of people watch and to get out of the heat because it was really hot outside. And, that kind of sparked my interest right out of the gate. And I started to keep tabs but not really pay attention. But if something sneaker related was on Facebook or something, I would read into it. But when I lost my job at AT&T, that's really kind of when I went down that rabbit hole, and I was like, you know what, I think I could do this.
So when you were waiting in line and you'd purchased a sneaker, you really did it on behalf of somebody else.
Correct.
And you were just being paid for waiting
Correct.
in line. At some point in time, you wised up,
Yeah.
and you said, hey, I can buy this myself and resell it and make a much bigger profit.
Correct.
Right? So when, you remember that first experience? And
Oh,
did you
yeah,
sell
I'll
it
never
to?
forget it because it was right at Caesar's Palace, and it's on Jaysse Lopez, right on that stop sign where you could go to the parking here or the employee parking back there. It's where the Cheesecake Factory hallway is. And my wife and I went for a pair of sneakers at 3 in the morning. She was still working her corporate gig, and the plan was to buy 3 pairs of sneakers that day because we thought we could sell them for a couple $100 over. And we eventually, my wife tells me, why don't you start working the line and figuring out what shoes they're going to buy, and whoever isn't going to buy the sneaker that you want, let's give them a couple bucks to get extra pairs. So we bought 18 pairs that day, but the plan was to buy 3. And I had saved, I had just got my tax return money. My wife put a couple dollars towards it. And we sold my intention, I wanted to buy 3 to sell 2 to keep 1. That was what I wanted to do.
Buy 3 to sell 2 to keep 1.
one.
And still make money.
Right. Yeah. And so we bought 17 and made $200 profit.
Per pair.
On each pair, and I still kept one.
And so how did you figure out who to sell them to?
Oh, I didn't. I don't think I had that part figured out. I think I was more excited about getting the shoes and saying I have these shoes. The first thing I did after we, get these shoes is run straight home, take pictures, post them on Facebook, and I go through like a crash course of learning, oh man, I don't have any of this figured out, right? Like people are asking for pictures, they're asking for time date stamps to show that I actually have the product and that I'm not trying to scam anybody. It was a lot of trial and error, and I laugh now and smile about how naive I was at the beginning, but that's the start of every business, right? You just
you're
get this
naive,
hunch.
but you have the the gumption and, the risk-taking ability and just to go forward.
And every part of it felt like, oh man, it's the end of the world when it didn't go like how you see it in your head. But like looking back, it was like the easiest. And man, I wish I could go back to how simple it was back then.
Yes. Well, and those were days before Zelle and some of the easy ways to.
Yeah, there was no TikTok. No, there wasn't any content creators on YouTube actively talking about reselling.
So you use Facebook really as
Facebook was the start of it, and I added myself to like over 800 sneaker groups globally when we opened the store. And I was just making this small little intro like, hi, my name's Jay. I own a sneaker store in Vegas. If you're ever in Vegas, like you might want to check this out. I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit different than your normal shopping experience back home. And a lot of the kickback at the beginning was like, I'm in Kentucky. What do I got? What business do you have posting in this group? And I'm like trying to educate people like, hey, like people come to Vegas not only for vacation, but work, conventions, this and that. And before Uber days, we bought a car and started driving guests to and from the Strip because they were complaining about the $50 cab ride at Boulevard Mall. Never focused on problems, always solutions. That was all I had time for, and still to this day.
So eventually, you did open up a store.
Correct.
At a retail physical store.
Correct.
At the Boulevard Mall. Like did $1 million in the first
3 months.
First quarter of business. Were you just like
I was on cloud 9. There was a few moments throughout the brand in those first 3 months where I'd go back and look at my wife and say, we're on to something special here, helping a guy get a heart transplant through the store. We didn't have a website. I didn't know how inexpensive it was to have a website. And I was just scared to kind of try. So we would do FaceTime appointments. And we would have guests call the store, and then we would, book an appointment for them and then call them via FaceTime and then show them the shoes we had. But when we first started, we only had like 134 pairs of shoes. So.
And how would you acquire that inventory? Would it be the waiting in line, or now that you had a physical store, you can go right to the distributors and purchase directly?
No distributors, all consignment. And we were doing some buying. So what we were really good at, especially at the beginning, is being in tune with the community and seeing what was actively being talked about. And that was what was giving us an understanding, okay, we should probably be a little aggressive in trying to source these. Let's actually invest some of our money in doing this. But the bulk of the product was consignment.
So somebody who, person to person, right?
Correct.
So somebody would own a pair of Michael Jordan
correct.
Nikes or whatever they are, and then want to resell them to make a profit, and then they put them in consignment. You would charge what? You charged
at the
lowest,
at the beginning we were charging 10%, which was the lowest consignment rate in the country, in the industry.
Right.
And we were able to hang on to 10% consignment, I want to say, for about the first 4.5, 5 years. So again, we're just trying to keep the lights on, and we figured volume was the play, not charging more. So our consigners were excited that we were charging these such low fees, and they were able to charge more than they could on their own.
And what was the average price per shoe at that time?
At that time, I think my average price point was like $350.
So you're making like $35 for each pair.
Right. But
moving hundreds and thousands.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but not only that, we were building a brand. So like, I started looking at like, okay, when people come to Vegas, the thing that I noticed is like on Sahara and Las Vegas Boulevard, we have like the world's largest souvenir shop, right? And if you go to Caesar's Palace, like the least expensive thing in there is $40, $50. So souvenirs, you want a memento, you want, the dad might be here on a convention. You have anything I could buy my kid? His shoes are too expensive. I got the shirt. So that started with, you know, the first order was 25 shirts. Now we're selling thousands and thousands of Urban Necessities shirts, but it's gone into hats, collaborations with the NFL, partnerships with American Eagle and Nautica. Like it went in every different direction. So that really helped us build a lot of margin. And so for me, we're selling all these sneakers, and I just wanted to sell shirts, but the sneakers is what was keeping us kind of like the awareness and building it. So it's been a lot of fun over the years.
Let's talk about what you have created so far today, and then I want to ask you about a little bit more about your background, about the homelessness. Today you have an incredible store over at the Forum.
Yep, Caesar's.
Which is different than a typical retail athletic shoe store. In what ways is it different?
So we have a tattoo shop that has five to six award-winning tattoo artists that focus on photorealism, and that's either like in black and white or in color. And we also have a barber shop in there. So when I was homeless, well, one of the things that I noticed in people watching is that most of the guests that would stay in the stores are spending north of 30 minutes before they spend $1, right? So I figured out if I could get a guest to stay in the store for more than 30 minutes, more than likely they're going to spend or become a promoter of the brand. So when we first opened the store in Caesars, we had over 6,000 different iterations of sneakers, whether that's a different colorway of a silhouette or a different silhouette in general. So I just wanted to put...
And were these all in consignment?
When I opened Caesars, probably 90% of the shoes were on consignment. And we're also doing that with clothing, right? So what's the one souvenir that you get when you go to a sporting event or a
T-shirt
concert?
or a cap?
So we started going to concerts just to buy the merch to bring it back to the store, and that stuff helped a lot. So, and it's easier to create margin and reselling.
So when you go to a concert to purchase it, look, I've been there with my kids. I've learned two things. One, they're very overpriced when you buy them at the concert, and two, they seem to run out all the time.
Yeah. So right. I would go, an example, Travis Scott. His first concert at Madison Square Garden, he did a collaboration with the New York Knicks. I'm like, this is probably going to be some special merch, like regardless of the price point. They started selling merch at noon. The concert's not till 8 o'clock at night.
Right.
So I went at noon, and they tried to tell me the same thing with some of the SKUs that they had. These are sold out. I'm like, grab your manager. And I'm like, I'm having a tough time. I explained to Mr. Manager, I'm having a tough time processing that it's 12:30 in the afternoon. The show starts at 8 and you're already sold out of this SKU. I had a feeling you got inventory somewhere else. I'd like to spend $50,000 on merch. Can you go grab that SKU for me? Yes, sir, coming right up. And then I took 3 or 4 employees, and we pretty much put all this merch. I bought as many T-shirts as I could at $50, but I turned around and sold those same shirts in my store for $250.
Wow.
And people were happy to pay it.
Wow.
You know, so you just got to get creative a little bit, and there's value in everything. Like, you might not appreciate it, but there's always someone else that, like, it becomes the twinkle in their eye that makes them go, wow, this is special.
And you can reach them now because it's a worldwide audience.
Yeah.
Right.
I joke all the time, from average Joe to Fat Joe, come into my store.
But it wasn't always like that. I wanted to chat with you about more about the homelessness. Okay,
stuff.
I mean, you lived on the street for
Yes, sir.
For a while,
I slept on a park on Maryland and Charleston for quite some time.
Right by the Huntridge there.
Yeah.
And and then you would, you talked about all the jobs, different jobs you
Yes,
had.
sir.
You really didn't stay in any jobs, and being homeless at that time, and you were telling me before the show, is a little bit different than being homeless now.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit more dangerous now.
Yes, sir.
It's everybody's kind of, stingy or not sharing with they did with each other. You did with other homeless at that time. But and you were selling water out on the street.
Yeah, I was really ashamed of having my hand out, and I really wasn't. I wasn't thrilled about having to dig in the trash cans for food, you know. So at some point, I start looking at, maybe I could sell water. I'd buy a cooler, some ice, and try to make a couple bucks. I'd always stop into the Sahara, throw a quarter or two into an old Elvis slot machine, and if I got lucky, I had money for McDonald's and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't homeless again because I had habits. It was more, I was really ashamed of calling my parents for a third time at 23 years old and saying, hey, can you help me fix this again? I have a single parent home. I have other, brother and sister, like they had enough going on, and I felt I was old enough that I could handle it. And so I spent 6 months panhandling, 6 months, trying to sell bottles of water, 6 months of trying to sneak into Bally's to go into the EDR to eat and stuff like that. And when I had enough, what I thought was enough money, I eventually started staying at the Wild Wild West. And one of my first, and I bought clothes, applied for a job, and my first gig in Vegas was the Best Buy on Maryland Parkway. And from there I worked at Sony Style and Caesars back in the day, and I worked at Nike, Virgin Records, everywhere.
So what was your observation about
being homeless?
Because in today's world, I hear all the time, hey, this is all a mental illness issue.
It is, and it was back then too. But
it wasn't for you.
It wasn't for me, but I think that's the biggest thing is these people are casted to the side, whether that's from family or just society, and there isn't the literature, there isn't the awareness, there wasn't the access to information like there is now. And even back then there were people that were faking it too, as far as when I was reselling sneakers, I saw guys that would, say they're homeless and they're out there with signs, kick me for a couple bucks and stuff like that, or, playing the drums.
The system.
But making real money and grabbing cars and leaving in valet, it was, all of it was a lot of...
But there are those people, kind of like you, the situation you were in, going from job to job. It's just statistically, there's, the vast majority of people in America don't have an extra $1,000 if something goes wrong in their pocket, and they're that step away from homelessness themselves. So, so when being out on the street, if you were the governor, what would you do to do something to fix, some homeless issue? You're not going to fix everything for everybody.
And the problem is that every person that you interact with is at a different level of understanding or mindfulness of what these issues may or may not be, and they might not care for some of the issues, right? Mm-hmm. I think, it's just, I would try to work a lot on self-motivation and trying to get them to understand that even though they might have these hardships, that these deficiencies shouldn't be debilitating and that they can be positive members of society. Try to get a better understanding of the things that motivate them or that they have interest in, mm-hmm. and then try to use that as the building block to build the confidence and teach them responsibility. I think that's the biggest thing that's missed out there, is that they don't understand they're capable of being able to repeat a process and build off of the repeating aspect of it. And, also understanding where they're at with their issues. A lot of them have serious issues, and some of them want to get help, and some of them could care less about getting help. And I mean, there's so many different layers to that onion.
So, I mean, but housing obviously is a big issue.
Housing isn't.
Access to medical treatment
is another issue, and those who pays for that? How do we get? I mean, we're all working on restricted budgets, and we all have that mood board with the dreams of all the things you want to address, but whose dollar does it fall on? And it shouldn't be everybody's, but we should all be mindful of our neighbors too, and try to help our community be better. And I think education is really one of the parts where we need to focus on, and there's not enough of that happening. Like even myself, I haven't done a good enough job of going back and reaching and trying, because this has now become a business, whereas before it was a passion project of buying time.
What's the most expensive pair of sneakers you've ever had?
In the store, the most expensive sneaker we tried to sell was $300,000. It was a Louis Vuitton Air Force One that was auctioned through Sotheby's. All those pairs sold for 6 figures.
Wow. And who was the customer to buy? I only got 30 seconds
Great
left.
question. All walks of life. I got guys that want to wear it. I got guys that look at it as an asset, that they want to sit on it and resell it at a later date.
Right, and most of them are athletes or are associated with
I would
the
say
athletic
most
world?
of it is middle class America that's just, into a hobby, and they understand, I got to buy a couple here to sell a couple there to be able to get the ones I want down the road.
Where's your store located? In Caesars? Where in Caesars?
I'm right next to the Apple store.
Right next? Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
What used to be there? Is that where the old Gap was?
Before that, it was Gap.
Gap. I
Before
remember
that,
the
it was
old Gap.
Bernini's and
Yeah.
a couple other spots.
Hey, you can visit this incredible shopping experience over at the Forum stores next to the Apple store, and
Yes,
you can,
sir.
as you're getting your Apple Watch or telephone repaired at Genius Bar, you just walk
Come
next
get it,
door.
yeah.
He's worked in both places.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so
Seriously.
much,
No, Mr.
Jaysse
Bernstein,
Lopez.
I appreciate
Thank you.
your time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Take care.